Food for Life is about understanding what's really behind the food we eat. Conventional milk versus organic milk. Organic milk can be upwards of double the price of conventional milk. What does it offer for the extra money? Steve Magan, an organic dairy farmer, is going to help us understand the processes behind organic milk so that we can decide whether or not it's right for us. We're here at his organic dairy farm. The milking equipment is humming in the background, and we're ready to go. I'm David Allender, and this is David Allender's Food for Life. I'm here with Steve Magan. Steve is a dairy farmer with 10 years of international dairy farming experience. Some of it is organic, some of it is not, and now he's an organic dairy farmer. He studied in New Zealand, he's studied in Wisconsin and central Pennsylvania, and now owns his own dairy farmer. So I think he's really qualified to tell us about the differences between organic and conventional milk, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say because, as we've discussed, organic milk can be double the price, and I want to know, is there a reason to buy it? So the first question that I have for you, Steve, is specifically when the U.S. Department of Agriculture certifies you as being organic, what are the requirements? What are they asking you to do that's different from conventional milk?
One of the big things they're asking us to do is to graze our cows for the period now is about 120 days of grazing. Those cows are to be rotated in the pastures so that each pasture has time to rest by the time the cows get back to it again.
Okay, so for 120 days out of the year, they need to be out in a pasture, and they can't stay in the same pasture. They have to be rotated through.
Yes,
now,
correct.
Why? What's the reason for that?
The reason for that is so that every area has a certain amount of grass. When the cows go into it, the cows get what they need from that area, and then that area is allowed to rest and regenerate before the cows are put back into that area again.
So in conventional dairy farming, they're not necessarily required to, they're really not required to do any pasture.
Not at all.
But they probably do some, but in general, because you've had experience in both.
I have. On the bigger part of it, most conventional dairy farms do not graze. Maybe the cows might see grass during their dry period, but during their lactating period, they're kept confined in a confined area.
And what is a lactating period?
That's the number of days a cow milks after it has its calf.
Is there anything that you have to do differently to the pastures versus a conventional farm?
Yeah, another organic regulation is no pesticides or herbicides to be used on any ground that the animals are physically on or will be eating any food from.
So you're not allowed to put chemicals onto the grass, the alfalfa, the grazing plants. Why is that? Why do they want those chemicals to not be on there?
That the cows go out, consume the forage, and they transform that forage into milk. And
they don't want it going into the milk.
They don't want it coming back to us via milk.
Now, a lot of other organic farmers talk about the big reason they don't want to put chemicals on the soil is that it damages the natural flora, or the funguses and the insects and the worms and so on that are supposed to be in the ground,
Sure.
which makes it hard for the grass and the plants or vegetables, whatever they're growing, to actually absorb the nutrition.
Yes.
So do you see that as being important here too, or one of the reasons why they're not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The microbiologic activity in the soil is definitely haltered with the use of pesticides and herbicides, as well as the soil structure. It breaks it down. We did tests out in Wisconsin with conventional soil and organic soil, and the conventional soil was as hard as a rock. I mean, like concrete. Whereas the organic soil, there was a lot of organic matter in it.
Meaning like dead plants and,
Yes.
and all that sort of stuff.
The organic soil was loose and airy and healthy, and the conventional soil was hard as a rock, dense, tight, and just dead, totally dead.
You also mentioned, because I know this is really important, a lot of people want to know about this, the growth hormones. You said in organic dairy farming, you're not allowed to use growth hormones.
No.
Or antibiotics.
No antibiotics or stimulating growth hormones.
Now, in conventional dairy farming, are you allowed to use those? What's the...
It's very popular.
Okay.
Very popular.
And why is that?
Dairy producers, being dairy producers, want to maximize the amount of milk they can get per cow. And with a simple shot, to be honest, I don't even know how it works, but I know that there's injections given, and from those injections, more milk is stimulated by the mammary glands of that cow.
Now, the growth hormone is typically referred to on the labels as RBGH. Now, I'm going to make you work a little bit here and tell us what that stands for so people know.
That's a recombinant bovine growth hormone.
Okay, all right. So it's growth hormone that's specific to bovines, or the name for cows.
Exactly.
Now, what about, it's legal, certainly legal to use that in the United States, but is that everywhere the case?
It's not. It's been banned in Canada, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Europe, all since 2000. So we're like in the Stone Age here.
So a lot of the world says we don't want
a lot of the world's saying we don't want it.
GH.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Now, in conventional dairy farming, they're allowed to use antibiotics also.
Absolutely.
What's the story with that? Because I've been to dairies as a manufacturing consultant. I've been into dairies where the processing plants, and I know they're very strict about testing the milk for antibiotics.
Every farm, on every pickup, every load is tested. Every load's tested, every farm, every bulk tank is tested. Everywhere in the United States it's done that way. Okay. But that's not to say that there aren't traces of those antibiotics, just like the bovine growth hormone.
Okay.
How do we really know how much is in there? Well, you don't, but you know that they use antibiotics, you know that they use the growth hormone.
With antibiotics, they can use them. Are there any requirements for how long they have to pull a cow from the herd that's on antibiotics to make sure that the traces don't get in, or at least that it's minimal?
Absolutely. That cow is tested. It's usually a withholding period of 7 to 10 days.
Now, can you use antibiotics as an organic dairy farmer?
Absolutely. We're required to whenever organic methods cannot take care of the situation, cannot resolve a situation, an infection, a sick animal.
So it is possible that a cow on an organic certified farm could have taken antibiotics. However,
our withholding period is 12 months, not 7 to 10 days.
Okay, that's that's what I wanted to get at.
Big difference.
So that's a big difference when you're comparing organic
Absolutely.
to conventional. Is if they do use antibiotics, it's a enormously different holding period.
Major
where they're held
withholding
off.
time difference.
Okay. How about the food that they eat when they're not grazing? Because you are producing organic milk all year round, and you don't have pastures all year round.
No.
It's October now. In a short period of time, we're going to have a couple inches of snow here.
Yeah. What we're all the food that right now we're grazing for about 5 months out of the year, and we are giving them stored feed for 7 months of the year. We have other farms, which I call satellite farms. Those are the farms that we're bringing all the stored feed for the 7 months of the year where things aren't growing.
Those farms that are producing it for you, do they also have to be organic certified?
Those are all our satellite farms, which we have certified under our Grandview Dairy.
Okay, so you've combined them together under your farm, and you have
under
these.
my farm name.
What about the corn?
The corn is without any pesticides or herbicides. we're planting corn. We are, after the corn comes up, we're cultivating it, mechanically cultivating it several times.
What does that mean?
When the corn comes up in rows, we're taking a piece of equipment through, and it's sort of tilling up the soil in between each plant row, and thus eliminating weeds. That's the idea.
Oh, so it's for weed elimination. Now that doesn't happen on a conventional farm.
Conventional farm, they go out, they make, they call their supplier, their herbicide supplier. He comes out and goes over the field one time with a spray. The spray is not going to kill that plant because it's genetically modified not to die under those conditions. And all the weeds die, the corn stays, and that corn is still, it's absorbed, the herbicide is absorbed into the plant, and then on a conventional farm is digested by the animals and consumed.
A lot of people believe, and when you look on various sources, a lot of people believe that corn that you described, that conventional corn, really doesn't have much in it in terms of nutrition because of the process that you just described.
Yes.
It's basically living on a fertilizer pellet.
Absolutely.
And also a lot of people don't think that genetically modified corn is the way to go.
No.
You know, some people do, some people don't. You have to decide for yourself. But your cows, as organic certified cows, are not allowed to eat genetically modified corn.
No genetically modified seeds under any circumstances.
Now, cows by nature are supposed to eat what?
Cows by nature are supposed to eat grass, not corn.
Okay.
Which is what the majority of conventional farms are feeding their cows.
So conventional farms are feeding them corn, which they're not really designed to eat,
No.
and it might not be the best corn in the world either.
No.
Now you are feeding them corn because if you just had grass, you would only have milk in the summer. You'd go out of business.
I wouldn't be able to produce as much milk as I do with feeding small amounts of it.
So they do all corn and some grass and so on, and they do it year-round with minimal grazing, but it gets them a really large volume of milk. You're not able to produce as much milk.
No, and that's part of the equation of the cost.
That's why it can be higher in price. All right, so if they eat higher quality food, you would think that they would produce higher quality, more nutritious milk.
Yes.
So is that the case?
That absolutely is the case, and studies have shown that with the omega-3s, their organic versus conventional milk is 70% higher. It has more beta-carotene. Studies show up to like 60-65% more beta-carotene in the milk, and CLAs, that's also higher.
What's CLA?
That's conjunctive.
See, I'm going to put you on the spot again.
Linoleic acid.
Conjunctive yeah, okay, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it either.
Let me pull my notes out.
Yeah, you got your notes there? CLAs. But whatever it is, it's got a lot more of it, is what you're saying.
Conjuncted linoleic acid. That's it.
Okay, so what you're saying is all this food actually does, according to studies, there are many that believe, and people have to take a look at the studies themselves and decide whether or not they believe it, but there's information out there to indicate that when you buy organic milk, because of these processes that you just described, the organic milk is going to have a higher nutritional value. And it's not just a little bit higher, what you're describing.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
In some categories, it's double.
That brings up the question of price. So we talked about some of the things, but maybe we can answer that question for our viewers, because a lot of people get hit with this price of, double conventional milk, $7 a gallon, $6 a gallon for organic, versus $3 or $3.50 a gallon.
Sure.
Why is it so much more expensive?
We're feeding on average more grass than a conventional dairy would. Therefore, we're traveling over, let's say we're feeding 30 to 40% more grass forage than a conventional dairy. That means we're running on 30 to 40, maybe even more, depending on the soil, acres.
If you have a conventional dairy farm, you really don't need that much land, do you? That's a long list of things that come together to make it more expensive, but we also just went through a pretty long list of things
reasons why it's better.
Right, to make it a better product.
Exactly.
Now, there's one other issue that I think is important to talk about when it comes to organic milk. You've mentioned to me in the past that your vet bills are very low, and that your animals live better, they're healthier, and they produce milk longer. And I think a lot of people are concerned about how animals, more and more people are concerned about how animals are treated on a farm.
Well, my cows get a lot more exercise than conventional dairies because these animals, the only distance they're walking is from their stall, maybe 200 feet, into the milking barn to get milked and then back out again. So the amount of movement these animals are making in a day isn't very much. And the conditions, they're walking on concrete. It might be a dirtier environment than it would be out on a pasture. And these things are put together, when you put them all together, you equal longevity in organic animals. It's when your cow is walking out there on pasture, on grass, on a dirt trail to get to her grass every day, twice a day, and you're keeping her in a clean environment, you're going to end up with a clean product and a healthy product.
Well, I'm sitting here listening to you say this and thinking about humans because it's so similar. Everyone tells us that we need to exercise, we need to be out out in the country, and we need to. And then you talk about how the conventional cows live, and it kind of sounds like the way most people work. They work in a little cube,
and they sit on a couch and watch TV
and eat corn chips all day.
That's it.
So that's, and I think that's really important to a lot of people to know that the animals on a farm are treated better, and that's a reason. I think that's another reason to look at organic milk and consider, if it's important to you, then it's worth paying a little extra money for it.
You're consuming something that is produced from an animal in its own natural environment, instead of consuming from an animal that was kept in a barn, walks on concrete, never sees the light of day.
Well, and that's important because I think beyond the nutritional value, there actually is something. I know there's something to be said for the energy that comes into the product and then comes into our body. There's some kind of intangible that comes from a product that's produced in such a beautiful environment by animals. You hear the happy cows produce good milk.
Happy cows don't just live in California.
They live in Pennsylvania also.
That's it.
So, well, thanks a lot for helping us to understand that.
My pleasure.
And I really appreciate your time.
You bet.
Have you ever thought about making a lasagna or stuffing some shells and quickly dismiss the idea because you don't have ricotta cheese? I'm going to show you how to make it yourself in 15 minutes with things you probably already have in your kitchen. Now, a big advantage to making your own is that you decide on the type of milk and the fat content. You can use low-fat milk, conventional, organic, or even raw milk if you prefer. It's all up to you. I'm going to make a rich whole milk organic version. All right, let's get started on this ricotta cheese. We're going to start off with some organic whole vitamin D milk. I'm going to pour it in the pan. I'm going to use a whole gallon. If you use a whole gallon of milk, it'll give you enough ricotta to do a nice sized lasagna. There's a lot of water in milk, remember, so as the milk turns into cheese, there's going to be a lot of water that comes out of it. I know it looks like a lot of milk, but you got to do this much to get enough ricotta cheese for a good sized lasagna. Okay, so we've got the milk in. Now we're going to put in 2 cups. This is about 2 cups of heavy cream, and I'm using organic heavy cream. Now you want to heat this slowly because you don't want it to boil over. And also, if you get it to just before boiling, but not boiling. That way you get the small curds, which I think is the best for ricotta. Also, we're going to add a half a teaspoon of sea salt. Stir this up and let it get warm. As soon as it gets warm, we're going to curdle it with some white vinegar. We've got the milk and cream mixture up to just about before it's ready to boil. The next step is to add some white vinegar or lemon juice. I'm using white vinegar today to curdle the milk. So we're going to start off with 3 tablespoons and see how that goes. Sometimes you have to add a little bit more. Put that in. And as you put this in, you can see it beginning to curdle, even just as the vinegar takes contact with the milk. Now I'm stirring it, and there's some curdling going on, but you can see it's not enough. You can still see that it's milky. So I'm just actually going to pour a little bit more vinegar in. Sometimes it takes a little bit more than the 3 tablespoons. Depends on the exact temperature you get. Do a little bit more. All right, now we're getting, it's losing its milkiness, and you're starting to see a clear, kind of a clearish liquid. The curds are separating from the whey. The clearish, yellowish liquid is the whey. And it looks like this is pretty much completely curdled. As soon as you don't see any more milk and you see just curds and whey, then it's finished. So then what you want to do next is begin ladling it out. You can see the curds. We're going to put it into a colander. I have a colander here with some cheesecloth. And there we go. And this is draining. This is separating the curds from the whey. After you get it all into the colander, you probably want to let it sit for about 15 or 20 minutes until you get it down to the level of dryness that you want for your particular recipe. Now that we have this incredible, rich, homemade ricotta cheese, Chef Gene Evans from West Virginia Northern Community College Culinary School is going to show us a quick recipe using homemade ricotta. Chef Gene, what are you going to make for us here today?
We're going to make a Sicilian-style ricotta cheesecake. And as luck would have it, your yield is about 2.5 pounds, mine is 2. All right, so I have 2 pounds of ricotta cheese that's going into the bowl. 2/3 of a cup of sugar. Orange zest, 2 teaspoons.
So you can use your finger to wipe that stuff off. I won't be offended.
Oh, that's all right. I'm a trained professional here.
Okay.
A teaspoon of cinnamon, and then a little bit of vanilla extract. We're just going to kind of blend that a little bit.
That's kind of thick vanilla extract. Is that a special type?
Yeah, this is a specialty brand that we get from a gourmet distributor. All right.
Okay, so you need to mix this up?
Yeah, so I'm going to mix this just a little bit. Just enough to incorporate the rest of the ingredients.
Okay.
And then one by one, I'm going to add 6 eggs to that. Or 2 by 1, whatever.
It's a lot of eggs. It's probably going to be a really rich cake when
Yes,
you're done.
it is going to definitely be rich. I'm just going to stop the mixer for a second, give it a little scrape down so we get all those ingredients in there. And then the last thing that's going to go in is a 1/3 cup of flour. And then that's going to go into our pan from there.
Okay.
So here's our 1/3 cup of flour.
I guess it is important to use a spatula inside some of these pans. These mixers are good, but they don't get everything.
They don't get all the way to the bottom, so you have to make sure that you scrape, because if you don't get the type of product that you're really looking for. So that's it. This is going to go into a springform pan.
You have your springform.
I have my springform pan here, and this mixture is going to go right into that.
Look how rich that is. And this is, you say this is an Italian ricotta.
This is a Sicilian style.
Oh, Sicilian, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we do a lot of Italian types of things here.
And the
It's kind of
ricotta
my-
cheese is what makes it Sicilian, is that correct?
Yes. And then all we have to do is fold this up, and this gets baked in a water bath for about an hour and 20 minutes. And then we end up with the end product that we have.
Excellent. Do you have one already
Yeah, we
made?
actually have one made, and if you'd like to see it, we can.
Yeah,
go
I'd
right
love to
that.
see it. Gene, I'm going to taste this wonderful cheesecake. The vanilla is probably one of the richest vanillas I've ever tasted. And I love this basil on the top. It's amazing how sweet basil works well with the dessert. That's really creative. Thanks so much for bringing us this recipe.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely beautiful.
Great. You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Let's look at our options. This is a conventional ricotta cheese, and it costs about 42 cents per serving. Now, let's take a look and see what's actually in this ricotta cheese. It's conventional. It says pasteurized milk, whey, skim milk, vinegar, salt, xanthan gum, locust bean gum, and gar gum. It says these are stabilizers. Well, let's take a look at our other option here. This is a ricotta that is completely organic, and it's around 72 cents per serving, so this is significantly more expensive. But let's take a look at the ingredients and see if there's a difference. And there is. Organic whole milk, organic skim milk, organic vinegar, and salt. That's it, nothing else. Now here's our homemade version of the ricotta cheese that costs about 29 cents per serving. But if you make a lower fat conventional milk version of it, it drops down to 10 cents or lower. So the important thing here is that we now have choices. For many of us, thanks to Steve Magan's explanation of organic dairy farming and the easy recipe for making ricotta cheese, we have new choices that didn't exist for us only 30 minutes ago. Now that we understand the processes behind organic dairy farming, we can decide if we believe the studies that say it's higher in nutrition, and we can decide if the benefits of higher nutrition are worth it for us. Hey, hold on. Hold the music. We're not finished yet. There's a test. Relax. Take a deep breath. Everyone passes. Go to foodforlife.tv. Click on Contact, place the answer to the Organic Milk Show question in the contact field, and I'll send you a PDF of the ricotta cheese recipe and a number of recipes using ricotta cheese from the West Virginia Northern Community College Culinary Institute students. I'm David Allender, and this is David Allender's Food for Life.